hanagani dashi do ya idene atachini dashinala akut initially. Apart from my current position with the Center for Health Equity Research at NAU, I'm also a board of director member for Native Americans for Community Action, Inc., which is a nonprofit organization here in Flagstaff that is dedicated to providing holistic healthcare services to our Indigenous and non-Indigenous relatives here in our community. So thank you very much for joining us for our 1-hour panel presentation on Rematriating Leadership and Nation Building, Illuminating the Path Ahead of Us. So before we give the time over to our phenomenal trio of amazing women who are contributing their perspectives from Dene, from White Mountain Apache, and also the Wallapai tribe about this topic, I do think it's really important for me just to provide an introductory primer to the topic and why we decided to focus on this today on Indigenous Peoples Day. So again, this panel will focus on the current and growing resurgence of matriarchal leadership. And what I mean by this is matriarchal leadership is the involvement and the recentering of Indigenous women's roles as principal guides and as decision makers within community and governance structures. So when we're talking about rematriating these spaces, we're really talking about women and, and I'm using that as an inclusive term. So women and people who identify as women being repositioned as primary actors in the reimagination and the building of our Indigenous futures. So culturally, for a lot of Indigenous groups, collectives, and nations, women are highly regarded as sacred for their ability to carry and bring new life into the world. And because of this, they do have a lot of say in the decisions that are affecting the home, the family, and the community. And this is not to say that, because of this, men have a lesser role in the community or in the home. Totally not the case, because a lot of Indigenous societies are egalitarian or traditionally egalitarian. So both men and women have specialized roles and are seen as equal to one another, so they complement each other. So to understand the significance of the rematriation movement, I think it's highly important that we understand this phenomenon as it's happening, as it's occurring right now at this time in society, against a backdrop of Indigenous experience with colonialism and with patriarchy over the past 500 years. So our ancestors have contended with discriminatory patriarchal systems that were imposed on them and are and were about maintaining power to legitimize and to justify disposition of land and erasure of cultural identities. And Indigenous women are reclaiming their leadership positions, and communities are widely supporting this movement, because we do see it as a way of reasserting our relationship with the land and our responsibilities to future generations, also our responsibilities to the land, and our responsibilities to our ancestors for paving the way for us to be here today, so that we continue to be here today as Indigenous people. We need our non-Indigenous collaborators to understand what this means for working together, or at least respecting the Indigenous assertion to take the lead when it comes to initiatives that really greatly impact Indigenous people and communities, especially here in Flagstaff. So today, without further ado, we have an amazing panel of Indigenous women who will be sharing their experiences, thoughts, and roles in the rematriation of leadership within their own communities, as well as talking about the implications about what this has for potential collaboration with non-Indigenous groups and governments. So our first presenter will be Darian Denali, and then she will be followed by Jandy Craig, and then Candida Hunter. At that point, we'll then open up for a general Q&A session with the audience. So without further ado, Darian, are you on deck?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, great. Take it away.
Thank you for that. Let me pull up my presentation. Is that presenting now?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. Let's see, maybe I'll introduce myself first. Yate Shea Darian Denali Inishna Kazathana Nilshna Do Nakaidina Ambashishin Tachini Dashiche Do Sinavanale Dashanale. Hello everyone, my name is Darian. I was born and raised here in Flagstaff, Arizona, and my maternal lineage is actually from Tunalia, Arizona. So my grandparents have been in the region since time immemorial, obviously. My grandfather worked for the Navajo Generating Station, and my Nali, she worked at Gray Hills High School in Tuba City. So my family's always been here within the region. I grew up here. I went to Thomas Elementary School, and then I went to Mount Eldon Middle School and graduated from Coconino High School. And from that point on, I attended NAU, where I earned a bachelor's degree in applied Indigenous studies. So that whole experience kind of reframed and almost in a sense validated the types of notions that I was seeing about Flagstaff and the types of ideas and identity, and it kind of helped me put words and ideas into just kind of those concepts of, what does it mean to be an Indigenous person, especially here in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with the presentation. All right. So the title of the panel is Rematriating Leadership and Indigenous Nation Building. So that was a little bit about myself in my introduction and how I orient myself here in Flagstaff. But the biggest thing about being here in Flagstaff is the connection to place as an Indigenous person. It goes a lot deeper than just that surface level of a career here and obtaining education here. Again, like I said, it's a time immemorial, deep place relationship to these lands. And I chose to put a picture of the San Francisco Peaks there as a Diné person. That is one of our 4 sacred mountains. And that's a mountain that holds a lot of teaching, a lot of culture, a lot of duty and respect. And my whole life growing up, I knew what the San Francisco Peaks meant to myself and my family. And my Nalis, they always taught me that value of respecting that place and respecting it for what it is as the sacredness, and how it holds our prayers, holds our traditions, and it has, so much more of a deep-rooted meaning than just a mountain, than just ecology. And then when growing up, I learned about the Arizona Snow Bowl issue and how much deeper that impacts our lifeways, and that representation of Arizona Snow Bowl on such a sacred place in Indigenous lands is, it cuts very deep. It really sends the message that, this place, it might be yours, but we're still here in occupied lands. And that kind of is what spurred my interest in not only my education in pursuing that bachelor's degree, but also in turn educating others. And that just turned into, a career in environmental education, a career in outreach and public communications, and kind of communicating to other people that this environmental justice issue goes deeper than just the ecology that a lot of folks like to kind of cling on to. It's really a social justice issue. And to me, it's very in parallel with, the coal resource extraction within northern Arizona and the uranium extraction and that deep-rooted history of environmental exploitation on Indigenous lands. So time and time again, you see these different environmental justice issues that have never been corrected. And it just kind of helps you gain that deeper understanding that these are deep-rooted responsibilities for me, that these are deeply inherited responsibilities to be able to bring awareness to these issues and hopefully justice to these issues. So kind of moving on from that, and this is a very wordy slide, so don't feel the need to read it all at once. It's a poem by Joy Harjo that I just kind of thought would be a really good ode to my grandmother. So this is my grandma, and this is where the matriarchal leadership really is instilled in me. This is my grandma. She essentially raised myself, my brother, and my 3 other cousins. And she took us in and she gave us a home, and she instilled a lot of teachings within us and what it meant to be, Diné people. And so the way that she is a leader towards us in our home, everyone was not, everyone was valued in a unique way. Everyone had their unique duty to be doing something. And I was kind of discussing this presentation with my brother and telling him, I don't really fully understand what matriarchal leadership means. And as we were discussing it, I kind of came to the realization that the way that I picture this matriarchal leadership is that everyone has this unique position. Everyone has this unique duty and responsibility. And the way that my grandmother modeled that is, in so many homes, it's very patriarchal, right? So the males have one streamline of duties, while the females, maybe they cook and clean, while the males are responsible for, just house repairs, car repairs, that type of thing. But with her, she always valued that equality. She always demonstrated that for us, right? So if we had a big family dinner together, she would always say, oh, you man folks, help us clean. Oh, can you take out the trash? Can you sweep? Right. So if everyone had that duty, everyone had a role to play in her household. And that's very much the way that I see our matriarchal leadership. Everyone has that role to play. Everyone has that knowledge that they can bring to the table, and that specific, experience that's going to inform them to be able to contribute to whatever challenge, whatever issue that we might be facing, right? So that just kind of, that uniqueness brings such a good strength to our communities. And when I talk about this, I specifically think about, the LGBTQIA plus community, who they are, the Two-Spirit community, and, all of these other people, our unsheltered relatives, even, our Black Indigenous relatives as well. They all are valid. And so many times you don't see that within the context of our Indigenous leadership. It's very uniform. And to be able to challenge these, or find solutions to these challenges that so many people are facing, we really do need to bring those unique perspectives to the table and understand what they can bring for us. So in terms of that, and speaking towards the future, what does rematriating leadership mean? To me, it really means that, those of us who are in positions of power, those of us who are in positions of privilege even, I consider myself very privileged to be able to afford myself an education, to be able to afford myself, just a good career. We really have to be able and comfortable to confront our privilege, and we also have to confront, all of the ills that are happening by these spaces of leadership and privilege. And you think about this in the context of things like Black Lives Matter movement, which definitely Black lives do matter. And how do we confront this in our own community? Whose voices are we listening to? Where are you getting that information from? And kind of, again, going back to that idea of, everyone has that unique voice. Everyone has a validated voice and experience when looking at these issues. So that's the biggest takeaway, is that, we need to be able to confront that and kind of be able to let go of our places of privilege and ultimately, elevate those voices that are oppressed. So that's essentially my presentation. I'll stop there for the next one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Darian. So our next presenter is Jandy Craig, and I will let her also give some time to introduce herself and then go into the presentation. So Jandy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Dagot she Jandy Craig ishti, she zisligai si an and dead shleet, zisligai si an dabi da yet nisha, dish cheatin in shleet, nakaya banishti. So my name is Jandy Craig. I'm from the White Mountain Apache tribe. I belong to the Dischitan clan, born for Mexican. My dad is from Mexico. So I identify as Chicana and White Mountain Apache, obviously. But thank you so much for having me here this morning. And I am going to go ahead and share my presentation. Let me make sure I have it. I don't know why it's not. Okay. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to share, I just have a very short presentation for you here this morning. But this is a picture of me and my daughter, Tani, when we attended the expert mechanism on Indigenous peoples at or it's called MRIP over in Geneva. I was selected as the Indigenous for the United Nations in 2017. I received the notification just 2 days before she was born. So we just, sort of figured out how to take her with me to Geneva along with my mother. I was able to get her passport for her very first time and took her on her first trip across the big pond, as they say, and was able to share that experience with them in Geneva. But I just wanted to share here, you also have your image of the San Francisco Peaks, or Zilcha. This is a very important place for us as Nda people as well. It is one of our 4 sacred mountains that protect us as Apache people. We also have friends and family who live in Flagstaff, as well as tribal members who are either attending college or working in the area, who are eligible for services where I work, which is the White Mountain Apache Behavioral Health TRIBA on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. So I just want to share that it is a blessed place there in Flagstaff. And this mountain in particular, the San Francisco Peaks, represents our elderhood for us. We are looking forward to that beautiful time in our life when we can be thankful for our white hair and for our wisdom, and being able to practice all the preparation that we go through in life to prepare our minds for calm and sharing of wisdom. So I also want to share that we call it Binit Gojon, which means the blessed place or the blessed land. And we remember that Neat is the same word in Apache for your mind. So when we think about how important and blessed the land is, it's also how we talk about our mind. So here are some pictures of ceremony. I want to talk about it because matriarchal leadership really comes out of our roles as women in our society, and especially in ceremony. So to me, matriarchal literally means women-led. Our mothers and grandmothers make the decisions about when or even whether a ceremony is going to take place. They're the ones who choose, the person or the people to guide their daughters through life, and they also make sure that we choose a non-relative in the community from a different clan, because this is how our ancestors built in the concept of family of choice into our society. And we want to ensure that our children always have support as they grow and learn through the challenging experiences of life. So this is where I learned how to be a strong mother. In ceremony, I was told to always hold my head up high with my face pointing towards my ancestors and to those spirits who know me and love me and they don't judge me. So that word, the first word, Naisen, that means like the godparents, I guess, in English. It's kind of a weird word in English, but it's a word that says, you know, the person who's going to help guide the girl through life. I just also want to quickly share that I'm having an issue with sharing my video. I don't know why it says it's disabled by the administrator, so I'm sorry you can't see my face as I'm sharing here this morning, but that lady in these pictures, that's me, the one in the purple. So that's who's talking right now. Okay, so kind of getting back to what I was talking about here. The other word I included here is shidake, which means, it has several meanings. It can mean my very good friend. It also means my spiritual family. So in our society, the concept of shidake helps us to remember to be a good relative to everyone, and also to help those in need, and to remember that whatever energy we're putting out there is what we're going to receive back. So it really helps me when I'm at work, especially when I'm having, you know, maybe having issues trying to get information to other people, you know, something that I might think is very important and maybe not, you know, other people don't think it's that important. For me, it really helps me to remember who I am as an Apache woman, as a traditional woman, you know, as a mother, as a godmother, and also especially as a human being. And it's helpful to remember that other people are also human beings, which kind of sounds silly, but what it really is having that trauma-informed lens to be able to connect with people and talk with people, and knowing that we've been through hard times, and to be gentle and non-judgmental, and to try to see how we can help one another rather than struggling to get something my way instead of your way kind of attitude. So I also wanted to share this because ceremony was how I was able to connect with my organization, the Continental Network of Indigenous Women. They came to my reservation to do a ceremony in 2009. And I was very curious about who they were and what they were doing. And I wanted to know how I could get involved because I felt like my experience was important. I wanted my community to be elevated to that international level. And so what I did was I went to their ceremony, and I traded what I had at the time, which was my ability to cook over an open fire. And so I cooked for them. And so I was able to connect with them, and eventually was able to speak at the UN on issues that were important to my community and what historical trauma looks like today. So just to finish up here, I know I'm very close to my time here, but I just wanted to share about matriarchs. This is who holds us accountable as Indigenous people. You know, right there in the center is my grandmother, my late grandmother, Nina Gatewood. Whenever I think about choices that I have to make, I think about how stern and loving that she was towards me, and helpful, in making those big decisions. And then I also have a picture down in the corner of myself with my daughter and my mother, Glenda Hernandez. And then up in the top corner is a picture of my co-coordinator, Dr. Rosalie Gonzalez. And then the background image is a picture of the elders who started the Continental Network of Indigenous Women in the 90s. Our network is comprised of 23 national Indigenous women's organizations in 19 countries across North, Central, and South America. And we are an Indigenous peoples organization that's recognized by the UN. And we have participated at the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples in Geneva and the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples in New York City since 2013. So just wanted to share, you know, whenever we have to move forward and speak, like even my ability to speak today, I made sure that I asked my matriarchs first if it was okay with them to represent and, you know, to share about the work that we're doing, because that holds me accountable and it helps me to be honest, to have that strength and wisdom and guidance from them. And also, I think the greatest thing is to continue the work that they started, because that's how we honor, you know, our elder women leaders, as well as our ancestors. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Jandy, thank you for sharing, and especially those photos are very captivating and very powerful. Just seeing all of these women and the culture and the ceremonies that have shaped you to be who you are and to contribute to this rebuilding of the future that you envision for your community, as well as other communities that you network with through your organization. So with that, our last presenter is Candida Hunter, and she is from the Wallapai tribe, and I'll let her take over.
Thank you, Carmen. Gamyu, Nya Candida Hunter Itkia. Hello, everyone. My name is Candida Hunter. I am Wallapai and Mexican. And I'm from Peach Springs, Arizona. So I was trying to multitask that I was good at this, but let me pull up my slide. Okay, are you able to see my screen, Carmen?
Not yet. I still see your camera.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay, here we go. All right. Working now?
Yeah, I see
Okay,
it.
thanks. All right, thanks again. As I said, my name is Candida Hunter. I'm Wallapai and Mexican. I am from Peach Springs, Arizona, but today I am joining you from where I live at, which is Kingman, Arizona, which is the indigenous homelands of the Wallapai people. So I really just thank you for this opportunity today to just share what our matriarch leadership means to me, and also to share some examples of how to work with indigenous people if you're non-indigenous and looking at trying to partner with tribes. So here is just a picture of Wikame, and Wikame is actually where our creation story begins. And we don't tell our stories during, we only tell our stories during the winter times. But I really think it's important to share that, because when we, as was mentioned earlier by the other speakers, is that we have a connection to the land. And so our creation begins here. And when I think about Flagstaff specifically is, so here's a picture of San Francisco Peaks, which is Wickenbacha in Wallapai. And so that also too is a sacred mountain, but we also have coyote stories that are told from that place. And so I think it was mentioned earlier, and I apologize, but Miss Benelli, I believe was her last name, had shared how we have a connection there, and Wallapai does as well, and has made several statements regarding the San Francisco Peaks. When I think about the way that I grew up, I was really taught by my elders to go away to school, come back and serve the people. And so I always like to share, I don't always share it, but the picture up at the top is actually me and my younger brother. I'm the chubby one. Just kidding, we're both chubby. But I love this picture because it's just, you know, two kids like out in the res, and we happen to get some bunnies and we learned how to take care of them. But I also wanted to share this because my brother has been, you know, he's like one of my best friends, but here is a picture of him when he graduated from NAU, and he actually won the Gold Axe Award, and he was the Native American Outstanding student that year when he graduated. But I like to share that because I always think, like, when I think of NAU, or sorry, when I think of Flagstaff, I also think about NAU and my brother graduating there, because when I completed my undergraduate, I actually didn't walk. And so when I saw my brother do that, it was like just full circle for me. So when I think about matriarchs and just the positions that we hold in our community, I think I really appreciate what Jandy shared about learning those responsibilities in our communities. And so here, when I think about what matriarch leadership means to me, it's really, I've had responsibilities from a very young age in being a sister. I've been an aunt, a mother, and someday I will be a grandmother. And so as a knowledge keeper, it's important for me to share that with others. I think it's also important to also mention that we really think, or for me, it's been a focus on responsibilities. What is my responsibility back to the community or the people that I serve? And it's not really about rights for me, it's about responsibilities and giving back to the community. The other thing is that Creator has given us many gifts. And so it's really important for us to recognize what those gifts are and use them to benefit our communities. We're also, as I mentioned, knowledge keepers, but we provide guidance to those that are maybe younger than us, and we continue to learn from those that are our elders. And then again, I just mentioned, how important it is to give back to our communities. So in positions that I've held various positions in my community. I served as an education coordinator, also as a youth reentry program manager, where we were working with youth to transition them from being in detention facilities back into the community. And then I also was on our tribal council for 5 years. So I was an elected official, and I served there. And I also now serve as the Senior Director of Tribal Affairs at First Things First, which is a state agency focusing on early childhood. So when I think back again to those ties to not only Flagstaff, but Northern Arizona, is that we're partnering with tribes to support young children, 0 to 5 population, and their families. The other thing I forgot to mention too in terms of NAU is that I also serve on the Southwest Health Equity Research Collaborative, there with Julie Baldwin and Carmelita and some others. So I really appreciate that opportunity to look at how do we address social injustices and equity in healthcare systems. And just not healthcare systems, but also just, in general, in the well-being of people. So as I mentioned, I served in tribal leadership for 5 years, but I also now serve as with First Things First, and we're partnering with 19 of the 22 tribes here in Arizona. And even though I am an Indigenous woman, as I also recognize that I am not from every Indigenous community. So it's really important that I think about, what are other tribal communities' priorities? What are tribes' culture, their language? What are their values? Because as I'm coming as somebody who is from outside their community, it's really important for me to think about what are their priorities and what can I bring to the table to support them in ways to do what's right for their community. And so again, just thinking about those benefits to the community, one of the things that I do a lot of work with too is research or data collection. And so when we really think about, that data collection piece is that, what is the story? And it's not for us to tell somebody else's story, but it's really for us to, help if we have the tools or resources that a tribe might be looking for to help support them in telling their story. And one way to do that is through data. The other thing is to, listen to learn and not respond. There's been so many times where I've been in spaces where you can have a tribal leader or somebody from a community talking to you and telling you about, this is where our community's at. This is the direction we're moving towards. Here's how I can support you. This is how you can support us. But many times I've seen people come to the table like, well, this is what we'll do. This is how we're going to do it. And not really take that time to collaborate and really think about, how do we best support the tribe and work with the tribe. And then the other thing is always taking time to self-reflect. As you know, we all come from different walks of life. We have different cultures, values. And so it's really important to think about what our own perception is and understanding is whenever we're going to work with an Indigenous community. And then I will close with this here. So as I said, I am a mother, and I'm not only raising my daughter now, but I'm also raising 3 of my nephews who are 3 to 14 years old. But here's a picture in the left-hand corner of my daughter Uriah and I, and this is when we were in China last year. I was selected to be a part of the World Forum's Global Leaders for Young Children. And so I was able to take my daughter there. And when I think again about matriarch leadership, is I think again about my responsibility as a mother and to my community, because someday my daughter is going to be in my shoes or in the same shoes as, maybe not exactly the same shoes, but in the shoes or in a she will be a mother someday if she chooses to be. And it's important for me to think about what are the values and what is the foundation that I'm establishing for my daughter. Because right here you see in the bottom left-hand corner, we're like sitting there, and this is one day we took a hike up on Piestewa Peak when we lived in Phoenix. And so there was just completely covered with clouds all across the valley. You could not see the valley at all. It was just clouds. But I remember, I was sitting there and we were talking, and she was telling me about, wow, look at this. You can't see where we live at. Isn't that where, Auntie lives at? Things like that. But I stepped away from her and she kind of walked off. And, here, when I see this picture of her sitting by herself, it just reminds me that, as a mother, I will not always be right beside her to, lead her. And so I hope that, in my position, that I set good examples and that I teach her as well as other youth of what I know, so that they can continue moving this work forward. That's going to really benefit our people for the well-being of all our people. And so I just would like to say thank you for this space and this opportunity to share with you. Hankia.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this topic, Candida. What really resonated with me as a Denali woman was when you were talking about how you're essentially grooming and modeling how your daughter should, represent herself, and how to carry on so that she has a successful, healthy, productive, not necessarily productive, but maybe just healthy. Let's just focus on that word, healthy life, healthy future. It made me think about my own mom, and one thing that she always taught me within her matriarchal leadership and her guidance was that, the reason why I am hard on you about doing so well in school and going on and like trying to embody all of these cultural attributes of what it means to be a Navajo woman is because when I'm no longer here, your education and your job are going to be the ones that are taking care of you. So you in return have to take care of it, and you have certain obligations and responsibilities to that, so that it takes care of you, so that you can take care of your family and your community. So that's what I got from your presentation. So again, thank you very much. And again, as the moderator, I just want to thank these women once again for contributing their perspectives. I thought it was really important for us to provide a diversity of perspectives from various Indigenous groups here, nations here in Northern Arizona. And as you had heard, we are all rooted to this place, to this Flagstaff, Kintlena, and we identify that relationship in our own native languages because we have ancestral knowledges and experiences that do inherently tie us to this land. And all of our presenters had eloquently talked about that. So we have about 20 minutes to just open up for Q&A. And I do have my own question reserved, but I do want to make sure that we have the space to increase interaction. So anybody, if you want to ask a question, you are free to do so. Just unmute your mic. Or maybe you could ask a question in the meeting chat. So while you're thinking of some questions, I do want to ask the presenters themselves, after listening to your fellow presenters speak about how they see matriarchal leadership stemming from their experiences, and how they're reaching into what was given to them from their families and then also providing it back to the family. Is there anything that you want to add to or that you want to respond to that somebody else had mentioned?
I'll add, Carm. So one of the things I really appreciated Jandy's pictures and how she was talking about ceremony. And I think one of the things personally is, I've been thinking a lot about just the roles that, how those roles haven't been really established, or if you lose that ceremony, how do you bring it back? And so that's actually something that I'm doing research now in my own community, and we have some elders who will help with that. But I always wonder, because there's certain time you do, ceremony for men and women when they're going through their puberty ceremony specifically. And so I always think about, if a community is unable to do it at every single time for a youth, is there like ways to do it quarterly where a group comes together, so then that way they learn those roles, and it also creates that sense of again belonging, and just ties back to the community and people.
I see that we have Darian online. Darian, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of elaborate on, or maybe just reflect on what somebody else had mentioned? And Jandy,
Yeah, so
now she's online.
For both of the presenters, I thought that was also a very good perspective. And it just really highlighted the importance of the intergenerational connection. Both of them really highlighted how they value being a mother, but they also highlighted the kinship they had with, their grandmothers and their sisters and their other community members. So it's just a very large connection. And one of the presenters too, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name right now, but she mentioned her brother getting the Gold Axe Award. And, that was a really nice highlight as well, that it's not, solely matriarchal leadership doesn't solely stop at, females. It influences the males as well. And it also highlights and appreciates their perspective, and in the sense, that balance that a lot of Indigenous communities always return to, is there's a balance in our communities, and the male counterpart is that. So,
thank you, Darian.
I was able to get my my video to work here.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I'm on two different devices right now, but I also wanted to just share that I appreciated hearing about some of the suggestions for moving forward and working, some of the things we need to remember working with Indigenous peoples. And I think that there are just a lot of connections that I saw, in some of in the other two presentations. So I appreciated. It was like, why didn't I think of that? So I'm so glad that you guys were able to articulate that for us. So thank you.
Yeah, I thought that you all complemented each other very well. And I do see that we do have a question in the chat from Nikki Ahrens. She says, our men are very important, and I'm wondering how they should or can play an important role in supporting women relatives while also leading, whether it's lending a hand, speaking with, not for, and not being in a superior role.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
My name is Tommy Lewis. I'm superintendent of schools for Coconino County. And I work with a lot of young people throughout the country and all over. And I'm a strong advocate for young people. And I see a lot of abilities coming up. I foresee that we're going to have some strong Native leaders, boys and girls. And when you visit schools, they really portray their image, their true Native identity. they're not afraid of it. They want to showcase it. They want to utilize that energy, and that really excites me. So, and as far as supporting young women, I do it all the time in my family, my nieces, my grandchildren. I have a lot of them, and so I always tell them, now is the time to learn. Leadership is within you. You're born with it. And if we're given that opportunity early on to lead, to take the lead role and responsibility, just the household chores, the home environment, your aunts and uncles will see something in you. They're gonna see that energy, and they're gonna want to give you more and more responsibilities. I think learning about your responsibilities, how to take care of your family, how to take care of your chores, and how to take care of your homestead, just chopping woods, bringing in water. You don't have to be told. You can just observe. You know when things need to be done. You know when to take that first step in getting things done. So that's how I think leadership is learned. It's not always in the classroom. It's not at gatherings. You learn bits and pieces of leadership early on in your life. And that trial and error begins to build up confidence in you.
Definitely.
So eventually, as you grow older,
your perspective on this. I do want to, as the moderator, I do want to make sure that we're also balancing the voices that are also answering this question. Again, alluding back to my introduction, where traditionally a lot of our societies were egalitarian. Both men and women had their own roles, and it wasn't, education wasn't specifically in an institutional setting, like as you had described. It was everyday life in ceremony, as Jandy had also alluded to. So with that, I also want to balance out what you had contributed with what our presenters also want to share in answering that, how they see as women, how men can support matriarchal leadership.
I'll add something, Carmen. So in terms of Nikki's question, I think about, so in my community, I mean, like my mother and father, they were really great support and they were always there for me. But I also think too, like when I think about my dad, like he was always supportive, like you can do this. If I said, oh, I want to try to play volleyball, and he's all, well, let's rent the gym and go try to play. And so I think like that was one way that he helped me. But I also think too about, when I thought about going into leadership, like running for council, it was actually my cousin who was the chief judge at the time, who was like, he was saying, you need to run for council, these things, you came back home, now this, is your next step. And so I remember, him saying that, but also other men in our community that I grew up with. Like I can remember when I worked for the JWTPA, the work program as a youth. And I remember, that men were there that would talk to me about, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? How are you going to help? And I think just those things was, even though they asked me a lot of questions, and some of them were also hard on me too, like, you're not doing that right when we're out branding cattle. And so I think that those things are really helpful in ways that they can do that. One of the things that I know I always think about is my daughter, and because I'm a single parent. And so it's really important to me to have like those male role models, my brothers, my dad, my stepdad, that have been there to also support my daughter. And I think, that she can go and talk to them or ask them questions that maybe she might not feel comfortable always asking me. So I think those are ways in which our men can support. And then also too, as mothers, is really teaching our young men to respect us as women, and women that they'll be growing up with, so that they recognize that there's an equal balance in our communities, and that women can hold these, leadership roles, or they do hold the roles.
Yeah, most definitely. Darian or Jandy, do you want to add to that or speak to any of what Candida had presented, or maybe you have your own thoughts on the question? How can men?
Yeah, I can add to that, or I guess kind of put in my own thoughts. As Candida was discussing, there's that balance in our communities and a lot of our stories. And I think about it in the concept of toxic within my generation, both the millennial and Gen Z generations, we're trying to confront that toxic masculinity. And what that means is, men only have certain roles. Men don't cry, men are tough. And that can be very toxic to someone's mental health. And in speaking of how that complements the female perspective, right? Not being afraid to call that out within your peers, not being afraid to educate yourself and think about, how has that impacted and affected my life? What is that doing to my worldview? Because when we think about our communities traditionally, pre-contact, pre-colonization, right? Everyone's talking about decolonization these days. When you think about that in our stories, we always had those counterparts, right? And I see a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia, a lot of racism that gets equated with toxic masculinity. So how do you begin to break down those barriers? How do you begin to address that? It's as simple as talking about it. It's as simple as being able to confront your own relationship to that idea. And really just, kind of being open-minded and learning what, where are those sources that I learned that from? Who taught me those ideals? Because it's, it's harmful to our communities if we're fragmenting each other in that way. And then just understanding on the female perspective as well that, some of my peers, we like to call men toxic. We like to, kind of call men out on these issues, but also not come from a place of understanding. And, this is a very big generalization, what I'm talking about right now, but, a lot of us, I see it on social media, people say like hashtag men are trash. And that's not completely true. There's a lot of value in our communities. So how do we as females kind of begin to confront those issues and kind of learn where is that almost toxicity coming from? So for me, it really does come from both places, right? We both have the responsibility to address these social issues, these ideas that are ingrained in us. And, in this day and age of social media, in this day and age of connectivity, it's so easy to find these resources, so easy to just educate yourself. So just kind of, start there, kind of start with that confrontation, start with yourself and having those conversations within your own family and trusted individuals. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a very strong, what do you call it? A proponent of critical thinking. I think we need to actively engage with resources and with the conversations that we have with people. Like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I responding to them a certain way on this topic that they had presented? Where are they coming from? What values do they hold? All of those things. I think critical thinking definitely needs to be elevated. I do want to recognize that we have a question here from Jamie Whelan. So maybe Jandy, it looks like you were about to respond and add on, but maybe I can redirect you to this question. So it says, is there a conscious effort to become matriarchal leaders in local government in the cities that border your homes or in which you live?
Yes, I would say definitely. We are having that conversation here with our elders and especially with some of the younger generations. So one of the local groups that I work with and that was recently organized is a group of Apache women who are, working to empower the community, educate the community on, for example, the census count and also getting registered to vote. So there is a level of community education that has to happen. But the whole, I guess the biggest goal that we have is to build up, especially the women in our community, to build them up to be able to feel empowered and strong about running in those positions. We have a leader on our board who is Donna Faye Whitesinger. She's a supervisor for Navajo County. And so just hearing about her experience running for that county supervisor seat, and also a lot of times being not only the only Apache in the room, but also the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room, having these very difficult conversations with what is essentially a group of white men. Now that can be very intimidating because, you know, we grow up learning, or we grow up being conditioned to have that patriarchal perspective, you know, that the men, we have to give them the time, they know they have the expertise and whatnot. So they're like, going back to what I'm saying, you know, providing that education to the women in our community, empowering them to feel like they have a voice, and that their issues are as important as any other issues that we talk about in the community. So definitely. Also want to give a shout out to AOC for, you know, encouraging us as women to organize and to vote and to run for office. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. I don't see any more questions here, and I know that we are at 11:59. So if you have any last comments, now would be the time. I also want to ask our audience members to stay online, and not online here, but log on to the other following presentation at noon. Any other last comments, presenters?
I didn't actually sign up for the noon presentation. I mentioned to Rose in an email that I was going to take it as a lunch break, but I was wondering, since you're recording it, is there like, could I go on the NACA website possibly and view the recording for the 12 o'clock session after everything's all said and done?
Yeah, I believe they are all being recorded. So yeah, that is a great question. I'm not certain on where